The village of Sibiri lay nestled between towering trees, their ancient roots stretching deep into the earth. The land seemed to hum with life, the air thick with the sense of lush greenery and the distant call of birds. Rolling hills bordered the village like protective arms, embracing its peaceful existence. The villagers moved through their days in harmony, their hearts in tune with the land. In Sibiri, there was no separation between the seen and the unseen. The spirits of the ancestors, old as the land itself, were always present, watching over their children. Every house in the village was built with love, each stone and wood beam placed with respect for the earth. The elders, with their weathered faces and slow, measured words, were the heartbeat of the village. Their wisdom shaped every action, every choice, and their word was law. When they spoke, the wind seemed to listen, and the earth beneath their feet would tremble as if in agreement. But it was not only the elders that guided the villagers. It was the very spirits of the land, whose whispers could be heard in the rustling of leaves or the murmur of the river. Every dawn, the people rose with the sun, offering their prayers to the spirits that lived within the earth, the trees, and the stars. The hum of ancestral prayers filled the air, keeping the village safe, ensuring the crops grew strong, and the animals flourished. The land was blessed because the people respected the old ways, and the ancestors watched over them in return. In Sibiri, a journey was not just a journey. It was a sacred ritual, woven into the very fabric of the village's existence. No matter how small the trip, whether to gather firewood or visit a neighboring village, each journey began with a prayer, an offering to the spirits for safe passage. The villagers knew the power of the unseen world. They understood that without the protection of the ancestors, the journey could end in misfortune, or worse, disaster. Every footstep taken was watched by eyes long gone, and to walk without. Their blessing was to invite calamity. The elders would gather the people, their hands raised to the sky, their voices steady and full of respect. Elder, ancestors, we call upon you today. Guide our steps, protect our travelers, and bless the path they walk. May the winds carry them safely, and the earth bear their weight with kindness. The villagers knelt before the elders, each one murmuring their prayer in turn. It was not just a custom, it was the very breath of their existence. To disrespect the spirits was to turn away from the protection that had been granted to their ancestors long ago. Every journey was a sacred rite, binding the present to the past and the people to the land. Among the villagers was Jabari, a young man with a heart full of ambition and a mind sharp as a blade. At 22, he was well liked and admired for his wit and charm. His energy was infectious, and his laughter was the song of the village. But Jabari was different from the others. While they honored the spirits and walked in the footsteps of their ancestors, Jabari had always questioned the need for such rituals. He had heard the stories, the warnings of the elders, but he had never felt their power. His belief was in his own strength, his own intelligence. He had no need for the unseen world, Jabari, to himself. The ancestors may have guided them, but I can make my own way. I will not be held back by these old ways. He was restless, eager to leave Sibiri, to find fortune in the neighboring village. He saw himself as a man of the world, someone who could carve his name into the pages of history. There was no time for ancient rituals, not when the future was calling his name. As Jabari prepared for his journey, his father, Baba Kofi, the village elder, called for him. Baba Kofi's face, though lined with age, was full of wisdom. His voice, though quiet, carried the weight of generations. Baba Kofi: Jabari, my son, before you leave, you must honor the ancestors. You must ask for their blessing on your journey. Without their protection, your path will be fraught with danger. Jabari paused, glancing at his father. There was love in Baba Kofi's eyes, but there was also a deep concern, a worry that Jabari's ambition would lead him down a path of trouble. Jabari, dismissively. "Father, I don't need their blessing. I have everything I need right here," he said, tapping his chest with confidence. "My strength will carry me far. I'll succeed, with or without the ancestors." Baba Kofi sighed, his eyes filled with a quiet sorrow. He had raised his son to be strong, to be independent, but he feared Jabari did not yet understand the power of the unseen world. Baba Kofi. "Strength alone is not enough, my son. The spirits do not favor those who do not respect them. You may walk with pride, but the road ahead is long and uncertain. Without their blessing, you may find yourself lost." Jabari, however, only shook his head, his gaze fixed firmly ahead. He was determined to go, and nothing would change his mind. Amina, Jabari's mother, stood by the doorway, watching with concern as her son prepared to leave. She, too, understood the power of the spirits. She had always been deeply connected to the world beyond the physical, and she felt the weight of the ancestors on her heart. She stepped forward, her voice soft but full of love. "Amina, Jabari, my son, you are like the river that rushes forward, eager to reach its destination. But remember, the river must respect the land it flows through. It must give thanks to the earth, or it will find itself running dry." Jabari turned to her, his expression a mixture of impatience and affection. Jabari, laughing. "Mother, you worry too much. I'm not afraid. The ancestors are just stories. I'll be fine." But Amina's heart was heavy. She could feel the spirits watching, and she knew that Jabari's pride might lead him into danger. She reached out, her hand brushing his cheek tenderly. "Amina, the ancestors watch over their children, but their protection is not given freely. It must be earned with respect. Please, my son, honor them before you leave." Jabari smiled, brushing off her worries. "Jabari, I'll be fine, mother. You'll see." With that, he turned and walked out of the door, his steps quick and confident. Amina and Baba Kofi stood in silence, watching him disappear into the distance. There was a quiet dread in their hearts, for they knew that the path Jabari had chosen might not lead to the success he imagined. The winds whispered through the trees, as if the spirits themselves were sighing in unison. And so Jabari left Sibiri, unaware of the trials that awaited him. The village remained steady and constant, its people bound by the ancient wisdom of their ancestors. The land hummed with life, and the spirits watched over all, their eyes turned toward the future. Jabari stood at the edge of Sibiri, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The sun had just risen, casting a golden glow over the land, and for a moment it felt as though the entire world was at his feet. The villagers were still asleep, their huts nestled peacefully in the embrace of the land, but Jabari felt no need for the quiet comfort of his home. Today was the beginning of his great journey. Today he would step beyond the village and claim the wealth and status he believed were his birthright. His heart was full of excitement, and his spirit, like the morning sun, shone bright with the promise of success. Jabari, muttering to himself, full of confidence, "The world is mine to conquer. I have strength in my hands and wisdom in my heart. The ancestors may have guided the old ones, but I will make my own path." He smiled, a wide grin of invincibility, as he walked down the well-trodden path that led out of the village. The soft earth beneath his feet seemed to carry him forward with ease, the journey ahead unfolding like a bright road in the distance. There was no fear, no hesitation, only the thrilling sense that the world was waiting to bow before him. But, in the stillness of the morning, something felt off. The air, though warm, held an unsettling silence. The birds had stopped their morning songs, and the trees, once full of life, stood still, as if holding their breath. Jabari shrugged it off, convinced that it was just the quiet of the dawn. Jabari, laughing to himself, what do the elders know of the world? The spirits do not control me. It's my own power that will carry me. Yet, as he walked further into the wilderness, the silence grew deeper. A lone eagle soared high in the sky, its sharp cry piercing the quiet. The sound echoed across the landscape, a single, mournful note that resonated through the air. Jabari, pausing but shaking his head. Just a bird, nothing more. There are no omens here, only my journey ahead. But deep within his chest, a faint stirring began, a whispering thought that he quickly dismissed. The eagle's cry was something the elders would call an omen, a warning from the spirits, but Jabari could not afford to entertain such thoughts. He had places to go, goals to achieve, and none of that could be tainted by superstitions. The wind began to stir, but it was not a gentle breeze. It was sharp, as though it carried a message. The trees around him swayed and creaked, their branches whispering to one another. Jabari barely noticed, lost in his thoughts of success. There was no time for the world of spirits, no time for the past. Only his future mattered. As Jabari continued deeper into the wilderness, the discomfort began to rise. His water, which had seemed more than enough when he left the village, now ran low. The weight of his pack, once light, now seemed to grow, heavier with every step. His feet, accustomed to the smooth paths of Sibiri, began to ache with the rough terrain. Jabari, muttering under his breath, annoyed. I must have been careless. This is nothing but an inconvenience. I'll push through. But even as he walked, his pride refused to acknowledge the discomfort. Each step he took was a defiant strike against the world he no longer believed in, the world of rituals and prayers, of ancestors and spirits. His strength, his intelligence, they would see him through. As he rested by a stream to gather his thoughts, the sunlight danced on the surface of the water, shimmering like gold. Jabari leaned over to take a drink, and it was then that he saw his reflection. The water, once clear and smooth, now seemed to ripple with strange shadows. His face looked twisted, distorted. His eyes were wide with fear, and his mouth, though he wasn't speaking, seemed to contort in anguish. Jabari, gasping, stepping back. What is this? Is this some kind of trick? He stared harder, but the reflection didn't change. His heart pounded in his chest as he struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. The face staring back at him was no longer the proud, confident young man who had left the village. It was a face full of fear, twisted by regret. Jabari, shaking his head, denying it. It's nothing. I'm just tired. It's the journey, getting to me. But deep inside, a small voice whispered that the spirits were speaking to him, that his defiance, his refusal to honor the old ways, was starting to take a toll on him. He pushed the thought aside, refusing to accept that something beyond his control could be at work. Nightfall came quickly, and with it, the eerie silence of the forest. Jabari set up camp near the edge of a dense thicket, the trees standing like dark sentinels around him. The crackling of his fire was the only sound that seemed to break the stillness. But as the firelight flickered, strange noises began to stir in the shadows. Soft, whispering footsteps, as if something moved just out of sight. Jabari, standing up, peering into the dark. Who's there? Show yourself. But no one appeared. The footsteps stopped as suddenly as they had begun. The wind howled through the branches, and Jabari felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. Still, he scoffed at the thought. Jabari, shaking his head, laughing nervously, it's just the wind. Nothing more. There's nothing to fear here. But the night was long, and as Jabari lay on his back, staring up at the stars, he felt an unsettling presence. It was as though the very earth was watching him, waiting for him to acknowledge the spirits he had so carelessly ignored. Then, in the dead of night, a figure appeared before him. An old man, draped in tattered robes, his eyes burning with an unnatural intensity. Jabari sat up quickly, his heart racing. Old man, in a voice as deep as the earth itself. The ancestors are watching. Your pride will be your undoing. Jabari blinked, trying to make sense of the figure before him. His heart pounded in his chest and his throat went dry. But when he looked again, the old man was gone, vanishing into the night like a ghost. Jabari, rubbing his eyes, bewildered. It was just a dream, a strange, vivid dream. Nothing more. But deep down he knew that something far greater than his understanding was at play. Yet his pride refused to let him believe it. The warning, the old man's eyes. It all seemed so unreal. The spirits, the ancestors, they were nothing but stories. He would not let them control him. As the days passed, the harshness of the wilderness grew. The heat became unbearable, the wind grew fiercer, and Jabari's strength began to falter. His water was nearly gone and his legs ached with every step. Strange shapes flitted in the corners of his vision, figures that seemed to move with the wind, their presence unmistakable. Jabari, gritting his teeth, pushing forward. This is nothing. I will push through. I am stronger than this. But the air around him seemed to grow heavier, as though the land itself was closing in. The wind, once a gentle companion, now seemed to carry a message, a warning he could not ignore. The trees groaned under the weight of the storm, and in the distance Jabari heard the low growl of thunder. The spirits were gathering. Jabari, pausing, his heart racing. What is this? What have I done? The realization began to settle in. He had ignored the signs, disrespected the ancestors, and now the spirits were stirring. The land was speaking, but Jabari had been too proud to listen. And the cost of his defiance would soon come due. The sun was now high, casting long shadows. Across the dense forest, as Jabari marched deeper into the wilderness, his heart pounding with an insatiable thirst for wealth. Each step carried him further from the safety of his village, further from the ancestral wisdom that had guided his people for generations. The air was thick with the scent of earth and leaves, but Jabari barely noticed. His mind was clouded by dreams of gold, jewels, and status, things he had always believed he deserved. With my strength, with my mind, I shall conquer all, he muttered under his breath, his voice a mixture of certainty and pride. The path before him seemed to stretch endlessly, clear and unbroken, just like his unwavering belief in his own greatness. Birds flitted from tree to tree, their song soft and pleasant, yet Jabari felt no peace. His thoughts were too consumed with the promise of fortune that lay ahead, deep within the heart of the forest. Do not be a fool. His father's voice echoed in his mind, but he dismissed it quickly. What did old men know of ambition? What did the past know of the future? His destiny was his own to shape. As Jabari pressed on, something changed. The world around him seemed to fall silent, as though nature itself had grown still in anticipation. A sudden breeze swept through the trees, its chill cutting through the warmth of the sun. The branches swayed, but there was no sound, no rustling of leaves, only a heavy silence that weighed down on his chest. Jabari stopped, looking around in confusion. He tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, but it lingered, gnawing at his insides. Still, he pressed on, determined to reach the end of this path, the path to wealth and power. Then, from high above, a lone eagle cried, a sound that sent a shiver down Jabari's spine. It was the cry of warning, the cry that had been passed down through generations, but Jabari only laughed. Just a bird, he muttered, continuing forward without a second thought. The eagle's cry echoed in his ears as if trying to reach him, but he would not listen. He was blind to the warnings, to the signs the spirits sent. He believed only in his own strength, his own desire. The path ahead was clear, but it was leading him away from the wisdom of his ancestors, away from the safety of his people's teachings. Soon, Jabari came to a clearing, the heart of the forest where the trees grew thicker and the air grew heavier. There, nestled in the roots of an ancient tree, was a dark opening, a cave hidden from all who passed by. Jabari stood before it, heart racing. Inside, he knew, lay treasures, riches beyond his wildest dreams. The very thought made his pulse quicken. This was the place, the cave of the ancient elder, where he had heard tales of wealth that could change a man's life forever. Here it is. This is my fate, Jabari whispered to himself, his voice tinged with greed. Without hesitation, he stepped into the cave. The darkness swallowed him whole, and as his eyes adjusted, he saw it. Shimmering gold, glinting jewels, all the riches of the earth, lying before him like a king's treasure. But as his hand reached out to touch the treasure, a sudden tremor shook the ground beneath him. The walls of the cave quaked, and the air grew thick, as if the earth itself was angry at his intrusion. Jabari stumbled back, but it was too late. The wind in the cave howled, as if the spirits were screaming, warning him to leave, to turn back. Strange whispers filled the air, voices from the past, the voices of the ancestors who had lived before him. Their words, soft at first, became louder, more insistent. "You have disturbed the sacred space," the voices murmured. "You will pay for your pride." But Jabari did not listen. His eyes were fixed on the treasure, his greed blinding him to the danger surrounding him. The cave began to tremble more violently. Rocks shifted, and the walls cracked. Jabari tried to move, but the ground beneath him seemed to pull at his feet, as if trying to keep him there. Then, with a deafening roar, the cave started to collapse, stones falling in a shower of dust and debris. Jabari turned and ran, heart pounding, but the darkness and the cave's anger seemed to follow him. He barely made it out alive, his chest heaving with the effort, his body covered in dirt and sweat. Outside, the air felt different, colder, heavier. The sunlight, once warm, now seemed distant, as if the world had turned against him. Jabari fell to his knees, gasping for breath. He had escaped the cave, but he could feel it. Something inside him had changed. A chill ran through him, deep in his bones, as if the curse of the spirits was already taking hold. That night, as he lay on the cold ground, trying to sleep, his father's voice returned to him. It came not from the air, but from deep within, his mind, a memory of words spoken long ago. "You do not defy the ancestors without consequence." Jabari's eyes snapped open, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel it now, the weight of his father's warning, the weight of all the ancestors who had walked this earth before him. His pride had led him astray, and now there was no escaping the price he would have to pay. Tears burned in his eyes as the realization dawned on him. He had crossed a line, and it was too late to turn back. The morning came, but it was no relief. Jabari awoke, but his body felt heavy, as if the weight of his sins was pressing down on him. His limbs felt sluggish, his muscles weak. He tried to stand, but his body betrayed him, and he collapsed back to the ground. He looked at his hands, and what he saw horrified him. His skin had lost its color, pale and sickly as though he was fading away. The curse of the spirits was taking hold, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. His body was withering, but his spirit, too, was decaying. The moral failure that had started in his heart now manifested in his very flesh. Jabari had violated the sacred laws of his people, and now the consequences were clear. As he struggled to his feet, Jabari heard the whispers again. The spirits were watching. They had seen everything, and they were waiting for him to face the truth of what he had done. That night, the dreams began. Jabari saw them, his ancestors, their faces twisted in disappointment and sorrow. They surrounded him, their voices accusing him of greed and pride, their eyes filled with shame. "You have broken the bond," they whispered, their voices like the wind, cold and relentless. "The price is high, and you will pay with more than just your body." Jabari awoke in a cold sweat, his heart racing. The dreams were not just dreams. They were the spirits calling him to account for his actions. The weight of his guilt pressed down on him, but it was too late for words. The consequences of his defiance were already unfolding, and there was no escaping the judgment that awaited him. As he continued his journey, weakened and desperate, he encountered an old man, a mysterious figure who seemed to appear out of nowhere. His name was Mzi Baraka, and his eyes were filled with a wisdom that Jabari could not ignore. "You have angered the spirits, young man," Mzi Baraka said, his voice low and steady. "There is no safe path ahead unless you turn back and seek their forgiveness." Jabari's heart sank. He had thought there was no way out, but Mzi Baraka's words confirmed his worst fears. The curse was real, and the only way to lift it was to return to his village and seek the forgiveness of the ancestors. Mzi Baraka's voice carried the weight of truth, and Jabari knew, deep in his heart, that there was no escaping the punishment. For his pride. The journey he had begun had taken him too far, and now he had no choice but to face the consequences. Jabari's limp echoed across the village, his once strong stride now a faint reminder of the pride that had once carried him so far. His body, frail and worn from the suffering of his journey, seemed to crumble with each step. The villagers gathered in silence, their eyes reflecting the sorrow of a people who had once witnessed his youthful confidence. Now, he was but a shadow of the man he had been, his spirit broken, his pride shattered. As he entered the village, the ground beneath his feet seemed to whisper the tale of his fall. The same village that had once cheered his ambition now stood, in mourning, the weight of his return heavier than any battle scar. The women looked down, the children stared wide-eyed, and the elders lowered their heads in quiet sorrow. This was the same Jabari who had once defied their ways, the same man who had left them with nothing but promises of wealth and glory. But now, all that remained was a broken man, crushed under the weight of his own greed. And in the midst of this silence, one figure broke through the crowd. Amina, Jabari's mother. The moment she saw her son, her face twisted in agony. With a wail that pierced the very air, she fell to her knees. The sound of her sorrow swept through the village like a windstorm, shaking the very core of everyone who heard it. Her love, once so vibrant and full of hope, had been torn apart by the consequences of her son's choices. "Amina, mother, I am sorry," Jabari whispered, his voice strained and weak. His knees buckled as he sank to the ground beside her. "I have failed you." But Amina, though her heart bled, lifted her son's face to hers. She wiped away her tears, and in the quiet of the moment, she spoke with a voice both firm and loving. "The ancestors do not forgive easily, my son, but there is always a chance for redemption if the heart is pure." She spoke as though the very wisdom of the earth ran through her words, her eyes searching his, willing him to hear the truth buried within her soul. "You have traveled far, Jabari, but the journey to healing is not done. The ancestors have witnessed your pain and your regrets, and they will guide you, if only you seek their forgiveness." Jabari's heart trembled. His mother's voice carried not only the weight of love, but the wisdom of generations. It was not too late, she was telling him. He could still find his way back to the ancestors, if only he could open his heart. But the burden of his pride weighed heavy on him, and his soul felt like a dried-out riverbed, cracked and barren. With his mother's embrace still lingering, Jabari stood, weak but resolute. He walked toward the village shrine, the one place where his ancestors had been honored for countless years. The air was heavy with the scent of the earth, as though the land itself was watching him. Kneeling, he pressed his hands to the sacred soil, the same soil where his ancestors had once walked, their spirits still lingering in the air. The weight of his regret was unbearable, a mountain he could never climb on his own. He bowed his head, and with the deepest sorrow in his heart, he spoke the words that had been waiting in his chest for so long. "Ancestors, I have wronged you," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I have forgotten your ways, and in my pride, I sought to change what was never meant to be. Please, forgive me. Let me honor you once more." The ground beneath him seemed to respond, the earth shuddering as if it too felt his pain. A gust of wind swirled around him, and the sky above began to darken. Jabari's heart raced as the storm grew in strength. The air crackled with tension, as though the ancestors were deliberating, deciding his fate. Jabari's eyes closed, the weight of the world pressing down on him. He could feel the storm coming, the ancient voices of his ancestors circling him like vultures, their judgment a heavy cloud above his head. Then, just as the darkness threatened to consume him, the winds stilled. The storm began to fade, and the clouds parted, allowing a warm, golden light to shine down upon Jabari. He gasped as the light bathed him, the glow so pure it seemed to cleanse his very soul. The ancestors had heard his plea, and in that moment, Jabari knew that they had granted him mercy. But the mercy was not without its price. Though Jabari would live, the punishment would follow him for the rest of his days. He would bear the mark of his pride forever, a reminder of the path he had once chosen and the cost of turning away from the ancestors' wisdom. Jabari stood, the weight of his new reality sinking into his bones. His body, once weak and frail, began to heal, but his soul was forever marked. He had been forgiven, yes, but the journey ahead would not be easy. The transformation had begun. His pride had been stripped away, replaced by the humility of one who had seen the depths of his mistakes. He now understood the teachings of his ancestors in a way he never had before, and with this understanding, Jabari vowed to spend the rest of his life honoring the traditions of his people. As he walked through the village, his steps were slower but sure. The villagers watched him, their eyes no longer filled with judgment, but with the understanding that even the greatest of mistakes can lead to redemption. Jabari took his place among the elders, sharing his story with the younger generation. He spoke of the dangers of pride, of the importance of honoring the past, and of the wisdom passed down through generations. His story became a lesson, not only for those who had watched him fall, but for those who would listen and learn from his pain. Jabari had been lost, but through hardship he had been found. His body healed, but his spirit had been transformed, and in that transformation he found peace. The path ahead would never be easy, but with each step he walked in the shadow of the ancestors, the weight of his past forever reminding him of the importance of humility, family, and respect for the spirits that guided them all. Jabari had grown old. His once muscular frame was now frail, his once sharp eyes now soft with age. He no longer stood with the same towering pride he had carried in his youth. His back, once straight as the trunk of the mighty baobab tree, now hunched slightly, and his steps were slow, as if every movement was a reminder of the long journey he had traveled, not just through the land, but through the trials of life. The villagers no longer whispered about Jabari's ambition or the gold he once sought. They did not speak of the power he thought he could command, nor the pride that had once driven him to defy the very ways of his ancestors. Instead, they spoke of his wisdom. Now, Jabari was no longer the man who sought to conquer the world. He was the elder who sought to protect the souls of his people. Young and old gathered around him, eager to listen as he shared the lessons he had learned. His voice, steady and deep, carried the weight of years and the knowledge of a heart humbled by the suffering of his past. In the evenings, as the fire flickered and danced in the center of the village, Jabari would sit with the youth gathered around him. The glow of the flames reflected in his tired eyes, and the warmth of the fire seemed to comfort his aching bones. He would begin, as he always did, with a deep breath, his voice rising above the crackling of the fire. "Pride," he would begin, his voice carrying the heavy wisdom of someone who had lived through the consequences of his own arrogance, blinds the heart and deafens the soul. The young ones would listen closely, their eyes wide with curiosity, some of them unaware of the dark past that had shaped this man into the elder they saw before them. "The ancestors," Jabari continued, his eyes distant as though he could see them, see all. They walk among us, watching over every step we take. They will not let pride go unpunished. I learned this, and it nearly destroyed me. His gaze would fall on the fire, as if remembering the long path he had walked, both the one through the land and the one through his own spirit. The young ones were silent. In those moments they understood that the fire in front of them was not just to keep the night's chill away, but to remind them of the warmth of their ancestors, the light of their wisdom. Jabari's words became their torch, guiding them through life's trials. "Respect your elders," Jabari would say, his voice full of the authority that only comes from lived experience. "Honor the ancestors and follow the ways of your people, for it is through humility that you will find grace. It is through humility that the ancestors will walk with you." Each evening, Jabari's words became a reminder of the importance of humility, of the dangers of ambition without respect, and of the enduring power of tradition. His teachings, shared in the warmth of the firelight, would live on in the hearts of the young ones, shaping their futures just as his past had shaped his. And Jabari, now fully aware of the presence of his ancestors, would often remind the youth of their guiding light. "The ancestors are with us," he would say, his voice now a quiet reflection of the strength he had once possessed. "They walk among us, watching over everything we do. Do not forget them, for they will guide you if you honor them." As the days passed, Jabari's health began to fail him. He had lived through his hardships, through his punishment, and now the time had come for him to join his ancestors. The villagers gathered around his hut, their faces solemn, their hearts filled with the quiet sadness of knowing that their elder, their guide, was nearing the end of his journey. One morning, as the sun rose in the east, Jabari breathed his last breath. The villagers wept, but it was not for the man they had lost. They wept for the wisdom that had departed from their midst. Yet there was something sacred in his passing. As his spirit left his body, a golden light rose from the ground, shimmering in the early morning light. The light ascended into the sky, toward the heavens, toward the ancestors he had so long sought to honor. The villagers watched in awe, knowing that Jabari had fulfilled his redemption. His spirit, now free, joined the ancestors he had once defied. It was as though the earth itself had witnessed the transformation of his soul, and in his ascension there was peace. The village, once torn by the consequences of his pride, now stood united in the knowledge that the lesson of Jabari's life would endure for generations to come. The elders spoke of Jabari, telling the story of the once proud man who had fallen and risen again. The youth carried his teachings with them, ensuring that the wisdom of the past would never be forgotten. In the village, peace settled like a blanket over a weary body, and the fire continued to burn brightly, casting its light on the path ahead, and so Jabari's journey came to an end, not with the wealth and glory he had once sought, but with a legacy of humility, respect for tradition, and the power of spiritual redemption. His spirit was at rest, knowing that the future would carry the torch of his lessons forward, and the village would never forget the price of pride.